Welcome to Mindfully Integrative Podcast with your host, Dr. Damaris G. Mindfully Integrative is a podcast discussing ways toward mindfully incorporating integrative health into our lives. This podcast will have informative resources, fun topics, interviews, and discussions relatable for today with a true mindful perspective in a mind-body, holistic life approach.
Hi, how are you? This is Damaris Murray Grossman, integrative family nurse practitioner, and I'm talking today about cortisol stages. I've talked about this before, but I'm really kind of diving into the more nitty gritty of it. You'll hear adrenal fatigue. That technically is not the right medical term. Think of it like you're either too high, too low, and these different stages are kind of where your body needs. Now, cortisol, just like stressors, it is, and life, we all need some of these triggers to work, to function. Now, the problem is when they become altered or imbalanced. So what does that mean? Let's talk about it. So I don't say adrenal fatigue because, like I said, that's not necessarily a proper medical term, but it's saying that kind of the adrenals, which do produce cortisol, may be having an irregularity, either too high, too low, or complex. So the stressors within the body may be coming up and we're not able to deal with it because we might be in a stage that has caused us so much allostatic stress in the mind or the life that it's just gone high, high, high. So imagine that stress level had a small bucket, you were able to just kind of deal with stuff, maybe just relax or go for a walk. But then when the stressors pile up, and your body is still inflamed or it is still sick or immune system, when it goes up, then you become depleted. And also there's some things when your body doesn't have enough to work with, then it finds itself low. And actually low cortisol is worse than high. There's two different extreme medical terms. One's Cushing's and one's Addison's. But majority of the time, most patients don't have that. So it's kind of like when I talk about celiac disease, most patients do not have that, a very small percentage. But I'm more in this sense of working with clients that always range in kind of that middle, oh, I'm still not feeling well. That's where it is. And it's like not necessarily a red flag because you're not, in the ER, but it's still a problem and it's still affecting you. And so what usually changes or what's part of that, hormones, age, what you put into your body, the environment, those are all going to play, lifestyle stuff and management. So let's talk about the stages. And this is called like a general adaptive stage syndrome, or the three parts of cortisol. You would consider it kind of initially you might be just normal, every day, everything is kind of going well. But then you've got an alarm stage. The alarm stage is what we would use when fight or flight. So consider it like, oh, okay, I need a little bit of adrenaline because I have to pay attention. There's a car in front of me. I have to stop. Someone is coming at you. You have to, be aware. You're running, you need some adrenaline. So in those scenarios, your heart rate is racing, you had elevated blood pressure, heightened alertness, you have more energy, and it's there to, help with the immediate stressors. The thing is that we end up being way high. We end up having those stressors a little bit too much, and our cortisol levels stays too high. One indicator we also use is DHEA, and that's another way of kind of determining where our cortisol levels are depleting. Now, it stays normal in this case. Sometimes in alarm stage, the thing is what you have to worry about is the person able to trigger off? Or are they always staying in that fight or flight scenario? Because if you're doing that, what happens is your body is more about breathing in your heart, which is like it wants to stay alive, and less about rest and digest, which is going to the bathroom, getting through the day. That's why a lot of GI issues where people are like, I'm constipated or I have diarrhea, because they are in such a heightened state, whether it's depression or anxiety, and their body is not, it's triggered off because the cortisol levels are off, because their body is inflamed or autoimmune system's off in some manner. Obviously a little bit more technical than that, but it's triggered because, our brain health, our body health is not in tune, it's not in line. And then, it's not balanced. So how do you get it back to? So that's one area. The next stage from that is resistance stage. So they call that, it's when the stress in the body enters resistance stage, you're just about trying to adapt. So we call it adapt stage. Now, this is a stage where your body is trying to get over the stressors. Now, you're hoping that happens, but in this time, the person is starting to become fatigued. So sometimes they overcompensate for the stressors in life. So this is like, hence someone's like, oh, I've got it. I've got it all situated. Started off rosy. The second stage was an alarm stage, but then you were like, okay, I'm overall getting there, but I'm able to pass, so I look kind of all right. The resistance stage is, oh my goodness, I'm running. I've got to look at my watch. I got to do this. I've got multitasking kind of feeling, and things are not in where you want them to be. The next part of that kind of really is you start to become fatigued, poor circulation, concentration. This is that early, like, I'm wired, but I'm tired. This is not fully depleted cortisol. This is starting still high cortisol. High to low, starts to dip down. And you're also noticing the 3:00 dip, 3:00 in the morning, starting to raise a little bit, and your patterns are just starting to go off. The purpose of this is trying to help you get through long-term stressors. But if this is not going well in that stage, you're going to have a hard time recovering. So this is still kind of in that high cortisol level. And how do we kind of get through that? So in another podcast discussion, I will talk about how to and what to use in different stages of this types of cortisol stressors. And like I said, it's not that all of them are bad. They're used for a reason. It's just a matter of where do you lie? And we all do lie depending upon what's going on, age, time, environment, things of that nature, and what you're putting in your body. Now, the most concerning stage is actually exhaustion stage. And, it's like, that's the one when you're like done. Now, Cushing's syndrome would be the one that's like completely done, or a severe, Addison's disease is when it's completely bad. When you have very low cortisol, Cushing's is when you have very high cortisol. Most of the time, those scenarios are very, very rare. But patients are really pretty close to low cortisol when they work themselves. So an exhausted person usually has, not always, but I usually feel like they're the high achiever, very skinny, always working, always doing, never stopping, never sleeping, never doing anything. And then they're just done. And then those get to the point where they crash and their body's just on and on and on. The ones that are depressed and slow moving, they're usually overweight, having problems in, concentration and stuff. They're more in that middle. They're not really, like I said, they're not in the extremes and they're not in the ER, but they're still pretty sick. And I think it can't be overlooked. So that's, it's super important to still see that. So when people come to see me, they want to get a cortisol test. When they come to see me, they want to talk about why their hormones are off, what else is going on, and then how can I help them through whatever stage they're in. And, there's a lot of ways to do that. And some of it is undoing and some of it is doing, depending upon which stage you're in. And I think that's super important to understand that, because I think what it is some people think that they're doing the right stuff and they may not be. And some people may be doing things, overdoing it. So it just depends. But in the exhaustion stage, this is kind of the most concerning usually, because the body is completely burnt out. You're in fatigue, you're weak in immune system. So this is a time when usually it's either going to be a heightened, instead of actually a low immune system, you're actually like hyper vigilant immune system. So this is when your body starts attacking itself. That could be Hashimoto's, there's a lot of different, scenarios that might come up. That could be a psoriasis, an eczema, brain issue, an inflammatory issue. There's many things that could come into play here. Usually hormone imbalances, chronic fatigue, metabolic issues, and depression. So then it gets worse and worse. So it's just like the idea is you're trying to stop it before it gets worse, or identifying it. So I say manage. Nothing is about
so sure it's always cured, but it's a management. So that's kind of and supportive therapies, as always, will be lifestyle management. So above anything in holistic medicine and teaching, it's about looking at your sleep. What are you doing for your stressors? What can you do for yourself? There's meditation. There's many forms of meditation. I talk many years on this, meditation, mindfulness, and that it's effective in making changes in your practice. And how do you do that? Whether it's movement meditation, whether it's sitting, drawing, coloring, whatever that is, it's important. Regular physical activity, walking, balanced nutrition, and preventing yourself to get to that exhausted stage. That's pretty challenging for those, but it's important. It's really important, because what will happen is then you will drop and you will be in the hospital, and you will not be able to, it will take you a very long time to improve. Adaptogens are always my go-tos. There's blends that I love for this. Of course, I love rhodiola, ashwagandha, holy basil. B complexes, omega-3s, and magnesium. Depending upon the stage that you're in, is depending upon the stage and what I would give you. So it just depends upon that and where we're at. So like I said, in the stages of these is all depending upon what's going on. In your alarm stage, you might be acute, but I don't want you to get to, chronic. Most of the time, though, I will tell you, most people that do come see me are usually already in the chronic stage of stress, and they're just trying to figure out how in the heck do they get out of it. And the hardest part is they don't know the tools to do that. Sometimes some of it's very simple, but sometimes people think that, oh my gosh, am I doing the right stuff? And usually it's just they just don't know. So it's just kind of getting the tools and interventions for that. So one major ones that, of course, I love, yoga, meditation, mindfulness, breathing exercises. You can see them on my podcast, on my YouTube channel. And, I have mindful coloring books online. I have different ways of reducing your stress levels, breathing work, aromatherapy, integrative therapies. So, and if you're local to me, there's an acupuncturist and massage therapist. So you can always see someone through there with us and then come in as a client. Nutrition's always going to be paramount. No matter anything I talk about, it'll always be nutrition, because what you put in your body is going to be an important part. Now, environmental toxins and things that are in your environment will be hard to get rid of. I live in the tri-state area, and it is honestly toxic, amount of things, and it is pretty difficult to get away from some of those things. But how do I help myself? I use an air purifier in the house. We have, filters in the water. We use filtered water. We're doing a lot more, as much organic as possible, and taking off our shoes, cleaning up, and keeping the toxins as much away in our life as we can. Overall, these are just ways, the nutrient foods, working on your gut biome. Now for that comes down to, like I said, when you're in that severe fight or flight, you unfortunately may not have as much of a good microbiome at that time. And your body is just not considering it as important, shall we say. It's not going, hey, let me do some work here. It just kind of doesn't really want to. So we're going to need kind of healing microbiome, things to help heal the gut and help bring back itself to a balance. And, getting yourself into a better sleep cycle is, very, very important. Supplements as needed, and then working towards some hormonal imbalances, because we really don't want you in that exhausted phase. Like I said, I don't necessarily call it adrenal phase. I just call it adrenal fatigue. I call it more of just exhausted. Your body is almost at the point of depletion, and it's a pretty scary time, because that's when you get really, really sick. And how can you get yourself to a better point? Like I said, some people may not consider it as important, but it is actually very important. Your body, physically, when it has manifested to a mental exhaustion, it will then, because of the body's stressors in life, will then become very, very sick. So, the key points here, really, it's just trying to understand each person. So it has to be somewhat personalized, and a really whole body approach. and the best way to learn management and long-term approach for you and what it is for you. Because some people are always on the higher state and some people more on the lower. And it really depends upon your personality, your, if you're into doshas, are you like high energy, low energy, middle point, and see what that is for you. If you have any other questions, reach out to me and I would be glad to help you. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Mindfully Integrative Show with Dr. Damaris Murray Grossman, family nurse practitioner. This podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and is not the substitute for professional medical advice, diagnose, or treat. Always consult your healthcare provider before making changes to your healthcare routine. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. If you enjoyed our show, please support us by leaving a mindful review on Apple Podcasts or your favorite streaming platform. Interested in being a guest or more information? Email us at info@mindfullyintegrative.com. For resources mentioned in the show, visit our website at www.mindfullyintegrative.com. You can also connect mindfully with Dr. Damaris on her social media links found on the site. May your strength and peace guide you to find a mindful way every day. Namaste.